Hey Civic Type R owners, today we're going to be doing a video on installing our upgraded transmission mount. This is everything that you'll get when you receive your mount. It comes disassembled. You have the top, the base, the bushing carrier, and the hardware kit. Next, we're going to go through all the tools needed to install this mount, and then we'll get rolling on installing it. The tools you're gonna need to do this job is a pair of flat nose pliers, a 10mm, a 15, a 16, a 12, a deep 10, a deep 17, some extensions, a ratchet, a 15, a 16, a 17, and 19mm wrench, and a torque wrench. So with that out of the way, let's get to the installation process. So we're gonna start by removing the intake. In this case, the owner has an aftermarket intake, so your removal process may vary. So with the intake out of the way, next we are going to remove our battery and our battery tray. So with all those bolts out, we can get the top of the battery tray out. Now the battery tray is a two-piece design, so next we're going to remove the lower portion of it. To remove this, there's two 12mm bolts that go into the side of the frame rail. You don't need to remove them all the way, you just need to loosen them. So with that, we can slide the lower part of the battery tray up and out. Now we have access to the transmission mount. So to start, we're gonna loosen the ground strap, which is just this 10mm headed bolt. Before we go removing the transmission mount from either the transmission or the frame rail, we wanna make sure that the transmission is supported from underneath. In this case, we're gonna do this with a jack just underneath the car. You can also do it with an engine support hoist from above, but for the sake of filming, we're gonna do it underneath so you guys can see things up here easier. So last thing before we go loosening bolts, there is this wire harness that runs along the frame rail that goes over the rear bolt on the frame rail. We need to undo the clip that is underneath the harness. It's between the harness and the frame rail. You can do that with a flathead screwdriver. You're just gonna release it and then that harness will swing out and you can get it out of the way so it's not covering that bolt head. So to remove the ECU, we have two 10mm headed bolts. There will be one right here, and then there will be another kind of in the front. You gotta have a really long extension to get down there. Lastly, we're gonna remove this wiring harness bracket. This one isn't totally necessary, but it just makes the job a little bit easier. It's two 10mm headed bolts. There's one right there, and then the other one is up here. So with all of that out of the way and our transmission supported, we can start removing the trans mount. We're gonna start with the 3 bolts on the frame rail. They are 3 17mm headed bolts. So with the bolts on the frame rail loosened, we're gonna leave them mostly installed, and we're gonna loosen the 2 bolts and 2 nuts on the transmission, which are also all 17mm. And then with all the bolts loosened, I am going to loosen the 12mm headed bolt that holds the 2 pieces together. This just makes it a little bit easier to get the mount out. It doesn't come straight up, you can kind of move it in and out a little bit. So with all the bolts out, we can lift the mount out of the car. There we go, stock mount removed. Similar to our passenger mount install process, we are going to remove the 2 studs out of the transmission. In this case, since we have 2 nuts from the factory, we can use just the factory nuts to do this. We will put one nut down and the other on top of it, and we want the flanges to be facing each other. So we're gonna tighten the nuts together, and then once they are tightened together, we will use the wrench and loosen the lower nut, which will pull the stud out. So now that the stock mount is out, we're ready to assemble our upgraded mount. First things first, we're gonna bolt our bushing carrier into our top piece. Now, the bushing carrier is not symmetrical, so you wanna pay attention and make sure that this side with the lip is facing the car. Another way to tell is that the logo will be pointing outboard. So in that case, it will look like this when it is installed. So both the bolts and the nuts that bolt the carrier onto the top piece are 15mm heads. So we're just gonna leave these bolts snug for the moment. We will finish tightening them when the mount is set up in the car. And then last, we're going to take the top and our bushing carrier and bolt it onto our base. And that will go just like that. So with our mount loosely assembled, we can go ahead and drop this into the car. First things first, we're gonna bolt the mount to the transmission. We include new bolts for this, so there's 3 short and 1 long. If you're doing this for a 1.5 liter car, all 4 bolts will be the same length. So for the long bolt, we're gonna install it on the rearmost towards the driver's side location. And then at that same location, this included spacer will go between the mount and the transmission. And then the 3 remaining shorter bolts will go in the other 3 locations into the transmission. And then one other small note for the ground strap. There isn't necessarily a best place to put it, but the most convenient place is in the same location where the factory one sort of bolted to. So it's this front left towards the passenger side location. You can see the ground strap is right there. So we're just gonna put that underneath this bolt head. Just like the factory bolts, these are also a 17mm head. And I'm just gonna snug them up, and then we will put the factory bolts, the 3 frame bolts, back in their locations. So right now I'm just getting all the bolts snug basically by hand, and then after that we will torque everything up. So with everything snugged up, we're gonna start torquing bolts. The 4 17mm bolts going into the transmission will be torqued to 58 foot-pounds. The 3 17mm bolts going into the frame rail will be torqued to 55 foot-pounds. The 2 cross bolts going through the bushing carrier will be torqued to 40 foot-pounds, and the 1 cross bolt going directly through the bushing will be torqued to 70 foot-pounds. So with the mount fully torqued and installed, we can begin the reinstallation process, which is basically the reverse of the removal process. So we're gonna start by bolting our wiring harness bracket back in place with the 2 10mm headed bolts. Next, we're gonna bolt our ECU back into place. That is with our 2 10mm bolts. So next we're gonna bolt our factory ground strap onto our included grounding point. So with the battery back in, we'll now install the intake and the installation will be done. So there you guys have it. That's the entire install process for our 10th gen Type R transmission mount. If you have any questions about this install, please reach out to us, send us an email at support@wunderladenracing.com, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll check you next time.